Hi, this is Alberto, and welcome to Audio Review Presents Audio Mistakes, a series where I talk about and hopefully help you prevent costly and common audio mistakes. Today we're going to talk about a very common mistake, and that is completely and utterly pointless in-store auditions. This is where you go into a store with the intention to audition a particular item and hopefully buy it, but the audition really is not very useful because there are so many variables, and what you end up listening in the store is completely different than what you end up hearing once you get in the component into your home. So let's go and look at what I'm talking about. So let's assume that this is your room and equipment. This happens to be my mini vintage system, one of the many systems I have in my house. As you can tell, it has a Thorens TD124 vintage turntable, a Fisher 600 receiver. Both of these items are circa 1960, a more modern Riga Apollo player, and two really good Tannoy autograph mini speakers. Now, I love the way this system sounds, but because of the size of the speakers, it's a little bit limiting. Especially they have a small woofer, and I would love to have more bass. So after doing some research, I decided I want to get a different pair of speakers, and I think I like Sonos Fabers. So I go into a store that sells Sonos Fabers to audition them. In this particular case, I actually have a picture from one of my favorite stores in the San Francisco Bay Area called the Analog Room in San Jose. So I go to the Analog Room. They happen to have the Sonos Faber Cremona speakers in store, connected to a beautiful system with airtight amplifiers and a bunch of fancy turntables. I listen to them, they sound great, but how are they going to sound when I bring them into my system? How are they going to sound with my amplifier? So there are so many variables. If you look at it, this room is very different. The electronics are different, the source components are different. They actually have, if you see at the bottom of the rack, a PS Audio power conditioner. If you look on the wall, they have some acoustic treatments. So it's a very different system than mine. The electronics are different, the room are different. So it's really silly for me to think that what I'm going to hear in the store is going to sound anything like it in my room. So how do I reduce the number of variables? Well, one thing that's relatively easy to do is I can take my amplifier and bring it to the stores. Most store owners will actually let you audition speakers with your amplifiers if you can go through the trouble of bringing it in. Now, this is particularly important for speakers because the way speakers sound has a lot to do with how the amplifier drives it. So, frankly, I wouldn't dream of buying a speaker unless I've heard it working with my amplifier. So, this is pretty good, but there are still a lot of big variables, for example, the size, shape of the room, etc., etc. So an even better solution would be to actually get the dealer to loan me the speakers, perhaps for a weekend, so I can listen to them in my own room. Now, this is an ideal situation, and typically if you have a good relationship with the dealer, they will let you do that. Perhaps you need to leave them a credit card with the amount of what you're borrowing in deposit. So let's assume I bring the Sonos Fabers Cremona into my room, and what I find, which probably would be the case because this vintage system is in a small room, is that there's too much bass. I wanted more bass, but these are full range speakers and the bass frankly overpowers the room. So it is not a good solution. And boy, am I glad I had a chance to try them in the house before buying them. Now, if you go and do this, probably the dealer would be open to let you audition speakers that are more suitable to the room. If I went back to the Analog Room and told them they're great, but they're too boomy in my room, maybe they recommend the same line Sonos Faber Cremonas, but maybe the Auditors. And as it turns out, Auditors are great for this room. In fact, is what I ended up buying very recently. So the idea is that if you cannot audition a system or a component with by minimizing the number of variables that make it different from the system that you have at home, the auditions are likely to be completely and utterly pointless. In fact, one of my beliefs is that system and room matching is more important than individual component performance. I would rather have 4 moderate price, moderate performance components that work well together than one spectacular component, say an amplifier, and just have it work with other sources and speakers that do not work well with it. So room and system matching is very important. So how do you avoid completely and pointless in-store auditions? First of all, minimize the number of variables by bringing in some of your equipment. This is particularly important if you're auditioning speakers. Try to bring in your amplifier. The way the amplifier works with the speakers is very important. And of course, the best thing would be to ask for an at-home audition. Most dealers will let you do it. If they know you well, they may not even have to charge your credit card. If it's the first time you show up in the store, they may actually charge your credit card, so make sure you bring the equipment back or you'll be buying it. So I hope you found this somewhat enlightening. It's pretty obvious stuff, but I see a lot of audiophiles or people trying to get into audio making the mistake. They go and audition systems in a completely foreign environment, and then they bring a component home and it sounds completely different. If you have comments or you have suggestions for more audio mistakes, please send them to me. My email is alberto@audiovviews.com. Thank you for listening.